Um, and we're recording. So, a couple things. We're gonna keep this brief. I'm gonna keep it under 15 minutes. Um, wanted to wanted to cover a couple of different things. Um, so first, we talked a lot about just living to the end and it dies, and we're very much in that space. Um, but I think one of the other things that I want to just highlight for folks is effective cooldown usage. Now, this is going to be different for different classes. Some people can fit multiple presses of their cooldown into the relevant lust window, which for us is like 430 um to 503 is where our lust is. So this is presses of your major DPS cooldown within that window. Um, it's intentionally not filtering for. I mean, we can filter it for ignore events after X deaths, um, but it's a similar ratio. Schwab gets multiple presses in that time. I think the same thing with like Icy Veins and Wings procs count as a cast of the spell ID in this instance, so it's a little bit buggy, but we should, in an ideal world, with a couple exceptions, and I think the exceptions are Balanced Druid. So Eland, this wouldn't apply to you, but we need to make sure that we're hitting our cooldowns in that lust window where we have lust, we have the damage amp, um, and we have all of the externals rolling. Right now we have only a subset of the raid doing that, and I think that there are a couple classes that don't necessarily benefit um, from hitting that window, but making sure that you are, if not hitting the lust window, at least hitting windows where you have the buff active is going to be something that's really, really important. I know we talk a lot about just needing to live, but we do have the ability to add a lot of damage without making major changes, just making sure that we're getting consistent with our cooldowns. I think the other thing that will help, and Luke, I'm going to pick on you for a second here, just because I knew you were a ready example of this on a couple of polls, but everyone has missed balls, everyone has delayed pickups, but this is just one where it's really easy to see what you're looking at. So, just so that people can understand the graph here, the y-axis is stat count. So, from 254 to 254.3, Luke has picked up one ball. From 254.3 to 2, so you get the gist of it. The higher the visual, the more balls you have, right? Notably, everyone is going to have roughly the same uptime within this window because picking up balls doesn't extend the duration. Um, Reducing the gap between where you pick up your first ball and pick up your fifth ball is going to net you a lot of damage. Now, this is a relatively small window to do increased damage, right? The first ball gets picked up at 254, the buff fades at 314. So you only have 20 seconds to slam, right? And you want to make those 20 seconds count. If 5 of those seconds are below your like damage potential, you're leaving a fair bit of damage on the table. Couple things that you can do with this, and I'm just gonna get back to where we just were. Couple things that you can do with this, but the end goal, and I mentioned everyone has this problem. I'm just picking on Luke here as an example, right? So here's that same graph again. You want to climb up that hill as fast as you can. So I think this is a similar gap where from like 250 to 255, that 5-second window of picking up balls, where you grab 2, you wait, you grab a couple more. Um, you want to climb that hill as fast as you can. So a couple of things with that. That means you can delay picking up your first ball, right? If you look at both Holy and I here, we climb that hill in about 1 to 2 seconds, 1 to 1.5 seconds. And we do that by significantly delaying where we pick up that first ball. So if you look at this, like Cammy's damage amp window falls significantly forward to everyone else's, right? On this one, he's the first DPS to pick up a ball. So he grabs 1, then there's a long wait, and then he has the full ball stack. So he only has a 4-second gap there. But it's still like you have the opportunity to further optimize if you give yourself time to set up. The way that you can make this happen is, and I'm just going to pick a random intermission here. The way that you can make this happen is, as you're entering into the intermission, you can pre-position yourself. This is just Holy's POV. You can pre-position yourself to scatter your balls, let them start moving, and then eat them all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So Holy just had a really clean eat. He didn't pick up. He held for just a second as the balls spawned around him, right? Gets knocked. The orbs are going to spawn. And he won't go pick any up. He has the ability, before this goes off, to pick up these 2 orbs. But he doesn't need to. They're not going to go into the boss. And he wants to get set up to have all of these for as much time as possible. Some classes benefit from this even more. Sub-Rogue, I think, in particular, has a couple of windows in the fight where they really want to delay. So you can even take a couple steps as an example. I think, Luke, this again isn't specific to you. If you want to delay picking up your balls, all you have to do is, before the boss knocks you back, just be further out. You generally don't want to be further out than these runes. Because if you're further out than the runes, like this ring on the ground here, you'll get knocked off the platform. Not great. But the further out you are, the more time you can let your 5 balls travel towards the boss without him getting a buff. So that you can either wait for your cooldowns to get set up, do pre-setup that you need to do. So getting the time from first pickup to last pickup down is a lot of free damage that we're leaving on the table. That's all I'll really say when it comes to damage, because the bigger problem that we're having right now is still like a live and a positioning one. But does anyone have any damage questions before I move on?
Would it be beneficial for melee? Because for sub, a lot of the phases, I'm ready to go instantly. Should I just go like under the boss's feet? That way the orbs spawn as close as possible.
You can
and then
I
insta pick up?
I wouldn't go all the way under him. If you look at like if I can just cherry pick like a random sub rogue with a log here, and if we followed just him going into intermission, so they're not there yet. So if you just watch where he goes, he's not under the boss, but he's on that innermost ring. He
I
goes
think that's
back
where
in.
I usually try and go.
Yeah, he goes back in, but he still hasn't. It looks like he still hasn't picked up an orb, unless I'm just not seeing the debuff. Did he not have break? No, he does. Weird. It's just not showing it on this UI.
Yeah, it's buggy.
But yeah, you can be in the, if you want to pick it up sooner, you want to be closer to the boss, but not so close that he can eat them as they're coming out of you if you're too far under. So you want to ride the line. Conversely, if we look at where some of the people that might be picking up later are, like this mage is going to want to delay because he has setup. So he's going to wait and then go scoop, right? Once you converge, now you can go pick up. So if you want to delay, you want to be further out on the platform for the knockback. But as the knockback is coming, you don't really want to be outside the line with the runes because this mage actually got knocked off there and took more damage. So you want to just find the line. So there's some min maxing to be done here, but there's not unlearn all of the muscle memory positioning that you have out there. It might be just, hey, if the balls aren't going to go touch the boss between this Raging Inferno tick and the next Raging Inferno tick, maybe don't pick up that first ball. Maybe pick them all up at once, right? But yeah, it's a lever. Luke, to your question, it's a lever that you can pull. Okay.
Yeah, I'll mess with it tomorrow.
Yeah, but again, I know I picked on your chart here, but like this is a problem that is not unique to you.
Yeah,
we
I
have
really didn't
everyone in
even
that
think
like
about it, like
4 to 5 pickup
daring.
window
So
range. Yeah.
definitely good to point out.
Okay. The next thing
I
is
have a
positioning.
question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, just on the damage aspect of stuff. So when we get to P3 and that P3 starts, I mean, you can tell me if I'm wrong or not. We're immediately lusting when P3 starts, and
Yes.
that's like during the knockback, people don't have orbs and stuff. Is it worth delaying lust, 5, 6, 7, 8 seconds? That way we're spending those extra 5, 8 seconds on the back end of the phase doing damage versus spending 5 to 8 seconds during lust collecting orbs. I don't know if that's just a collective. It works better for everybody. I'm in the melee camp with everybody else. I mean, we get knocked back and we spend the first, 5, 6 seconds of lust collecting orbs.
Yeah.
Versus spending, the last, maybe you lose the debuff, but you're still in a lust window, spending 5 to 6, 7 seconds of lust hitting the boss. Versus, I don't know if that's, like I said, if it's a better for the group thing to do it that way or not.
Yeah, I've been hitting it basically as soon as the knockback happens because we have folks that, like I said, pick up balls on the early end and folks that pick up balls on the late end. So it's a balance between munching Cammy's damage uptime versus munching this uptime. I think there's definitely a point where it becomes like a 40 chess puzzle. I don't think we're there yet. I think we can delay. The knockback happens, the first ring spawns, and then we can lust. But I've just been ripping it early because I've seen people picking up balls. That's definitely something we can adjust. Yes.
Yeah. I personally don't think it matters because I know it helps healing, and then also it's 40 seconds, and no one's cooldowns are going to last that long. That's my opinion on it.
No, as far as in this window that's on screen right now, wholly agree. I think Vess, you were saying though, like on the tail end, we may not have the amp anymore, but lust when we're connected to the boss versus lust when melee aren't touching the boss. Is the lever there. But yeah, I think we don't want to delay long, like at 2 seconds at most, because we do have healing catch up to happen. We do have people ready to slam.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like I said, whatever works obviously for the collective group. I just was curious on the lineup with that.
Let me take a look at timings there to see how much we're actually losing, if it's worth shifting, because I know that's the start of each of those phases is very spooky from a healer standpoint, so I don't want to munch too much into our potential throughput there as well. Any other damage or throughput questions here before we switch to positioning?
Nor.
Sweet. Okay. So positioning. So our biggest thing right now on the positioning front is really just consistency with overheated. So this is just a random overheated as we're acquiring a spread. Our goal is to make a line and then have that line hook out in an L for melee. We can even hook out in like a kind of bastardized T because we have a pretty high number of ranged here that we need to be a part of that line. Our goal is to also keep the edge of the room clear, especially on the first overheated of each phase, so that the people getting hit by the tank slam can move outward. So I'm going to kind of play this POV from a ranged perspective real quick, so you can see we make a really good line right here. And we have the little shootout. Like, this is quality positioning, right? But ideally, the folks who are over here on the far left, we would want to kind of shift, like copy this whole thing and paste it. Like, I would be one person width this way, and we would have a little gap along the edge here. It's a minor optimization, but what it will let us do is it will let us run reliably with this group into a fully clean space after the tank slam. Because right now what happens is the tank slam goes out, all the stuff spawns, and the people run right into spawn tornadoes. It's kind of tricky to see from my POV, but if we back it up like 1 second and we go to Holy's POV, Holy's talking in this one. But the same POV. So he's in the tank
we
soak
can't
group.
hear it.
This is
Whatever that's worth.
This is the same line, right? So the exact same pattern, but from a different perspective. These guys get forced a little bit out. It turns into kind of a tornado cluster, and there's not a real safe place for them to go. We actually end up with a pretty good bait on the back of all that, but we can make the experience feel a lot more comfortable and safe for the people in that tank soak if we give them that little bit of room on the edge.
That orb pop was
Sorry?
nothing. I was just saying that trigger was crazy.
Yeah.
I ran into it 3 times.
You're good. So what that would look like, right, is we have our line, we have our T. We want to cut out the people who are standing in the red circle space, and ideally we get comfortable with kind of shifting into a full line. There are a few people who are in a wrong spot here. I'm in a bad spot, right? Cammy, I think you were a little far back on this one, tucked into a nook. We want to try and avoid some of the nook tucking. Our melee, we have room for this demon hunter to move like over this way and stand along the edge, so they have melee range of the boss. If this demon hunter moves, the warlock can slide up. Ferris, you can even come up here with your overheated and be in the melee line, and we can get that T shape pretty tight. It's gonna free up room for these guys, even if we still have Eland on the edge. If Eland just tucks back into the line, that should also help. But it gives us space for the guys coming out of the tank soak to have somewhere to flee. So I think melee healers as well, if you guys join the melee line, if there's space, and just getting more consistent with using the space towards the middle of the room, it's going to feel a lot more comfortable. Later
My
in the
mastery
night
is stupid and bad, and I'm trying to stand close to the tank soak people to heal off the tanks, the heal absorb.
Fair. There's yeah, I think play with it to the extent that you can. It's definitely not going to be a universal thing. I think later into the night, sorry, that's Holy's POV still. Later into the night, we were looking a lot better with our use of space in the middle. A quick example of that before this phase. I had it on this pull and I lost it. We make it on this one all the way to the innermost ring, right? So our line is a little bit spicy here. But if the boss will move his wing, you'll see we have a very similar pattern, right? Kind of a cluster of 3 here, a big straight line, but this one goes all the way to the middle, which is great. So if we can tighten up this little outside space, our people coming out with the baits are going to have a much easier time moving. So that's overheated. The other thing that I wanted to touch on, we'll talk about intermission in just a second, but the other thing that I wanted to touch on is how do you move once you've done your soak? Right now, like just cherry picking the
So we've
same
got-
log from.
we've got- oh, there we go. Okay. Sorry, I was super distorted for a second. It's good now.
Okay, perfect. Cherry picking the same log from before, right? This brand is facing towards the outside of the room. You can see their overheated people are making a line. The melee are making a T, right? It's very similar to what we're doing. Our brand positioning, or our overheated positioning, has gotten a lot better. But watch how these guys move. They're gonna scatter together as the lava geyser happens. So they scatter together, and then they're all gonna move. These guys have a bit of a different pattern. That's their first one. If we look at the subsequent brand movement, you're gonna see they're just gonna move. They're just gonna move as a unit away. This is the set where the overheated pop coincides with the brand. The previous one, you'll see the other movement set where they actually tow away, get healed off, and then come back to bait. I think that this movement is a little bit more complicated than what we have. The way that we've been doing it, in just a simple replay format, is the boss is going to cast his brand, right? I think right off the bat, when we face the brand straight this way, it just creates a little bit less space. I think if we turn the brand to be like on the Z, it's going to give us a little bit more free room to play. But if I just hit play here, boss is going to cast his brand. We're getting healed off. We kind of trail to the outside, which is good. The lava happens, but then as the lava is spawning, we're kind of slow to move back out and through. I think upping our out time is going to be good. So that was wipe 9. So if we find that same 204 wipe 9, right? What that looks like in practice for this soak is we have overheateds right up against the brand here. I think if we are able to rotate the boss, it doesn't have to be a full 90 degrees, but just a little tick, it's going to make this feel a lot more comfortable. It's going to give the overheated people confidence to stand along the line, because right now we're making this U shape, which we eventually broke out of later in the night. But this U shape is super deadly, because your people who are dodging these items here are going to just end up having to do a ton of extra dodging work. Now, that doesn't mean it's necessarily super difficult, right? Can I slow this sucker down? If we play this slowly, right? We're dodging. You have a lot of time standing in the swirl before it pops. You have 3 whole seconds when the swirl hits the ground. The lava geysers have gone, and that heal absorb only just went away, right? If we look at that one more time, 0.25 might be a little too slow. Oh, 0.5. The brand happens. My debuff is going to get healed off right here. Still the same debuff. This is a new debuff. So 1, 2, 3. It still hasn't popped. Now it pops. All of the lines had time to move before that last debuff pop happened. So you have a little bit of buffer. You don't have to panic because you're standing in a swirly and get out of it. If you need to take 1 second and wait in your swirl that just spawned, you can do that to dodge. But the movement here should ideally be together, right? We want this movement to be together. We want all the people with the heal absorb to come together back towards where the brands are. If you look at the mini map here, we actually do a pretty good job of this. People do come back for the bait, but what happens is in the process of dodging, we have some people dodge further around the circle, right? Ideally, we should have the whole raid back. The lava geysers are about to happen. We want to be along the fire. So, like, with these people on the side. But what we end up having is, like, half the raid on this side of the boss, half the raid over here. We have 1 second to bait. We need a bait right now. All these people have to move again. So if we're able to consistently move back into where we need to be first and get comfortable with that dodging, you'll get a couple of extra globals on the movement front. And it's also just not a super spooky moment when it comes to dodging, because again, you have a ton of time. And as always, I know I always mention this, with the line dodges, just little movement is better. Big movement is super spooky. The lines are very thin. You have time to move and react. Just take the minute that you need to make sure you're not going to get hit by one that's immediately near you, but then angle your camera down and go. I'm generally pretty bad at angling my camera down, and I actually almost get hit twice on this set, right? Once right there, and then I almost move into another one on my pathing, trying to reach someone for oppressions. If we look at Holy, who's actually really good about angling his camera down, we'll see a very different POV, right? He's, as soon as these guys respawn, he's gonna have his camera top down. Super minimal movement right there to dodge that set, right? There's swirls on the ground. We're dodging. Lava geysers are also spawning. That's okay. There's plenty of time to just take with your camera top down to assess where the lava geysers or where the lava waves are coming from and dodge. That's really it. Just getting comfortable with that position. We all know, I think we've all heard it a couple of times now, so I won't belabor the point, but just getting comfortable with moving consistently with our overheateds and building that line so that we're able to bait well, because our baits just kept getting better throughout the night. There were a couple weird ones, but we got a lot more consistent, which is really good. The more consistent we're able to get, the easier this is going to be. But we've got a very strong looking comp coming into this tomorrow, so we should hopefully put him in the dirt. Any last minute questions, guys? I said 20 minutes. We got a 5-minute late start, and I took 25, so apologies.
I have a question just whenever we're done with all the recording stuff. It's just about positioning stuff you had mentioned in there. It doesn't have to require
Yeah.
everyone, though.
No, you're good.
So you talked about
sorry,
pointing. Oh, sorry.
That's real quick. Just are there any other questions before, and then we'll come back to the positioning one? Awesome. All right, then we'll